It was supposed to be a routine flight. Clear skies, calm passengers, and just enough turbulence to keep the seatbelt sign glowing. But what unfolded in first class on this cross-country journey was anything but typical. When a liberal pilot confronted Leavitt over her political stance involving Crockett, what followed was a jaw-dropping twist that left the cabin in stunned silence and the internet ablaze. The drama began shortly after takeoff. Carrie Leavitt, a rising conservative, figure known for her outspoken views and recent public spat with Representative Jasmine Crockett, had settled into her seat in first class. She was heading from Dallas to Washington, preparing for a televised debate and thinking through her talking points. But she didn't expect the confrontation to come at 35,000 feet, and certainly not from the flight deck. Sources confirm that the pilot, identified only as a longtime employee of the airline with a history of liberal activism, requested to speak with Leavitt personally after recognizing her. He approached her seat during the flight under the guise of a casual chat, but witnesses say the tone shifted quickly. He came up smiling, but it was clear he had something to say, said a nearby passenger, who asked not to be named. It went from pleasantries to politics fast. According to multiple accounts, the pilot began questioning Leavitt's recent comments criticizing Crockett, particularly a fiery exchange on Capitol Hill, where Leavitt accused the Congresswoman of abandoning the Constitution in favor of theatrics. The pilot, clearly agitated, accused Leavitt of promoting dangerous rhetoric and claimed her views were fueling division. Leavitt reportedly remained calm, but firm. I told him, respectfully, that as an American he has every right to disagree. But confronting a passenger mid-flight wasn't exactly professional, she later said in an interview. I was stunned that he'd use his authority in that way. The cabin grew tense. A flight attendant, sensing the discomfort of other passengers, intervened and asked the pilot to return to the cockpit. He complied, but not before making one final remark. This country doesn't need more Leavitts. It needs more leaders like Crockett. That could have been the end of it. But then came the twist no one saw coming. Shortly after the incident, the plane encountered unexpected turbulence, severe enough to jostle drinks, startle passengers, and trigger the usual oxygen mask on the ready warnings. The flight was forced to make an emergency landing in Nashville due to what was later described as mechanical concerns and pilot stress. When the plane landed safely, authorities met it at the gate. Leavitt was escorted off, not in cuffs, but for questioning. Shockingly, so was the pilot. In a stunning turn, it was revealed that the pilot had been under investigation by the FAA for prior professional conduct violations, including another reported confrontation with a passenger over political views, though the airline had quietly settled that matter. This latest in-flight incident went viral after a video surfaced of part of the exchange between Leavitt and the pilot, recorded discreetly by a passenger in the adjacent row. The clip shows the pilot leaning in, voice raised as Leavitt responds calmly. The video has since racked up over 12 million views on X, formerly Twitter, sparking a fiery national debate. Supporters of Leavitt hailed her composure and criticized the pilot's behavior. Conservative commentators framed the incident as another example of liberal overreach, warning that political bias was seeping into every profession, even those meant to remain neutral in times of crisis. He abused his position, plain and simple, said one Fox News analyst. When pilots bring politics into the cockpit, we all lose. Others, however, rallied to defend the pilot, claiming he was standing up for values he believed in. A trending hashtag, #PilotForTruth, emerged as some liberal voices argued that Leavitt's politics represented a threat to democratic norms and deserved to be challenged, though many stopped short of defending the setting or manner in which the confrontation occurred. The airline has since placed the pilot on administrative leave pending a full investigation. In a brief statement, they said, "Our pilots are expected to uphold the highest standards of professionalism, both in and out of the cockpit. We take all reports of in-flight conduct seriously. As for Leavitt, she's not backing down." Yuri, a fiery post on social media the next day, she wrote, "If standing up for our Constitution makes me a target, then so be it. I won't be silenced at 35,000 feet or anywhere else." In an age where political lines seem to pierce every part of public life, from classrooms to coffee shops, perhaps it was only a matter of time before they reached the skies. But for passengers on that flight, what began as a routine trip ended in a story they'll be telling for years, and one that continues to ripple far beyond the runway. It was supposed to be a routine flight, clear skies, calm passengers, and just enough turbulence to keep the seatbelt sign glowing. But what unfolded in first class on this cross-country journey was anything but typical. When a liberal pilot confronted Leavitt over her political stance involving Crockett, what followed was a jaw-dropping twist that left the cabin in stunned silence and the internet ablaze. The drama began shortly after takeoff. Carrie Leavitt, a rising conservative, figure known for her outspoken views and recent public spat with Representative Jasmine Crockett, had settled into her seat in first class. She was heading from Dallas to Washington, preparing for a televised debate and thinking through her talking points. But she didn't expect the confrontation to come at 35,000 feet, and certainly not from the flight deck. Sources confirmed that the pilot, identified only as a longtime employee of the airline with a history of liberal activism, requested to speak with Leavitt personally after recognizing her. He approached her seat during the flight under the guise of a casual chat, but witnesses say the tone shifted quickly. He came up smiling, but it was clear he had something to say, said a nearby passenger, who asked not to be named. It went from pleasantries to politics fast. According to multiple accounts, the pilot began questioning Leavitt's recent comments criticizing Crockett, particularly a fiery exchange on Capitol Hill where Leavitt accused the Congresswoman of abandoning the Constitution in favor of theatrics. The pilot, clearly agitated, accused Leavitt of promoting dangerous rhetoric and claimed her views were fueling division. Leavitt reportedly remained calm, but firm. She later stated that she told him respectfully that as an American, he has every right to disagree, but confronting a passenger mid-flight wasn't exactly professional. The cabin grew tense. A flight attendant, sensing the discomfort of other passengers, intervened and asked the pilot to return to the cockpit. He complied, but not before making one final remark. This country doesn't need more Leavitts. It needs more leaders like Crockett. That could have been the end of it. But then came the twist no one saw coming. Shortly after the incident, the plane encountered unexpected turbulence, severe enough to jostle drinks, startle passengers, and trigger the usual oxygen mask on the ready warnings. The flight was forced to make an emergency landing in Nashville due to what was later described as mechanical concerns and pilot stress. When the plane landed safely, authorities met it at the gate. Leavitt was escorted off, not in cuffs, but for questioning. Shockingly, so was the pilot. In a stunning turn, it was revealed that the pilot had been under investigation by the FAA for prior professional conduct violations, including another reported confrontation with a passenger over political views, though the airline had quietly settled that matter. This latest in-flight incident went viral after a video surfaced of part of the exchange between Leavitt and the pilot, recorded discreetly by a passenger in the adjacent row. The clip shows the pilot leaning in, voice raised as Leavitt responds calmly. The video has since racked up over 12 million views on X, sparking a fiery national debate. Supporters of Leavitt hailed her composure and criticized the pilot's behavior. Conservative commentators framed the incident as another example of liberal overreach, warning that political bias was seeping into every profession, even those meant to remain neutral in times of crisis. Others, however, rallied to defend the pilot, claiming he was standing up for values he believed in. A trending hashtag #PilotForTruth emerged as some liberal voices argued that Leavitt's politics represented a threat to democratic norms and deserved to be challenged, though many stopped short of defending the setting or manner in which the confrontation occurred. The airline has since placed the pilot on administrative leave pending a full investigation. In a brief statement, they said that their pilots are expected to uphold the highest standards of professionalism, both in and out of the cockpit, and that they take all reports of in-flight conduct seriously. Leavitt, for her part, didn't back down. In a fiery post on social media the next day, she wrote that if standing up for the Constitution made her a target, so be it. she wouldn't be silenced at 35,000 feet or anywhere else. The aftermath spread fast. Leavitt appeared on television, the next morning reiterating her stance. Her campaign saw a spike in donations and her online following grew exponentially. Meanwhile, members of Congress began weighing in, with some proposing legislation requiring stricter neutrality standards for professionals in public service roles. Supporters and critics alike agree on one thing: the skies are no longer neutral ground. In an era when political tension bleeds into nearly every aspect of daily life, even the safety of a sealed cabin flying miles above the earth is not immune to confrontation. For those on that flight, what started as a simple trip ended as a symbol of a country where disagreement has taken on dangerous altitude. As the news cycle rolled on, the incident quickly transcended a mere passenger dispute and became a political litmus test. Pundits debated it for days, splicing the grainy video clip frame by frame, analyzing body language, tone, and even the expressions of nearby passengers. Talk shows were ablaze. Podcasts dissected the ethics of in-flight discourse. Political commentators used it as a metaphor for the state of the nation, a divided cabin where everyone thinks they're the captain. In conservative circles, Leavitt was being championed not just as a politician, but as a symbol of endurance in the face of ideological hostility. A viral fundraiser launched within 48 hours raised over $500,000 for her upcoming campaign. She kept her cool while he lost his wings, read one meme shared widely among supporters. Conservative influencers hosted live streams replaying the clip, drawing parallels between the pilot's conduct and what they claim is a broader trend of liberal intolerance. On the other side, progressive voices framed the event as a distraction from the real issue, the substance of Leavitt's critiques of Crockett and the broader ideological agenda she represents. Some even questioned the narrative being pushed by Leavitt's camp, pointing out the power dynamics involved. "Let's not forget," one commentator said during a CNN segment, "this was a brief verbal confrontation. The pilot didn't detain her. He didn't raise his hands. He spoke his mind. And we've suddenly got a national panic?" Still, pressure mounted on the airline industry to respond decisively. Several major carriers began quietly revisiting their training modules on political neutrality and personal boundaries. At least one union representative noted a marked uptick in internal discussions about passenger interaction policies. Meanwhile, the FAA confirmed that it had expanded its investigation into the pilot's conduct, including his social media activity, which reportedly contained a mix of progressive commentary and posts criticizing prominent conservative figures. Though none of the posts violated any legal guidelines, their tone, described as partisan and aggressive by one agency official, was considered concerning for someone in a public safety role. Leavitt's legal team also confirmed they were exploring civil avenues not for monetary damages but to ensure this type of inappropriate targeting doesn't happen again, as one spokesperson put it. Behind the scenes, aides reported that Leavitt was already drafting a formal address on what she called ideological weaponization in public spaces, which she plans to deliver at a national leadership conference later this month. At the center of the storm, the pilot remained silent, declining requests for interviews or statements. His union appointed legal counsel, and while some leaks suggested he felt morally justified in addressing Leavitt, others within the airline reportedly felt he had crossed a line that jeopardized professionalism. Amid all the noise, one detail continues to haunt both sides: the emergency landing. Though officially chalked up to mechanical concerns, aviation experts privately speculated that it may have been influenced, at least partially, by the stress of the confrontation. If proven true, it could open a legal and regulatory can of worms with implications far beyond this one flight. In the days following the incident, passengers were offered travel vouchers and apologies, though several said the flight was unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. One woman seated a row behind Leavitt later told reporters, "I thought the only drama I'd have to deal with was running out of overhead bin space." What's clear now is that the incident has entered the national consciousness as more than just a clash between a politician and a pilot. It's a snapshot of a country where even the skies aren't safe from the battle lines of ideology. where the first-class cabin becomes a front line, where calm responses go viral and professional lapses become moral indictments. The plane may have landed safely, but the turbulence hasn't stopped. As the media whirlwind continued, Leavitt's political profile surged. Interviews, op-eds, and appearances on conservative outlets painted her not only as a victim of in-flight harassment, but as a figure standing up against what many in her base view as the creeping politicization of everyday life. She leaned into the narrative, framing the incident as emblematic of a broader cultural battle. "This wasn't just an argument," she said during a widely watched town hall in Tennessee. "This was an attempt to intimidate, to silence, to shame someone for thinking differently, and I won't let it slide. No American should feel unsafe expressing their beliefs, especially not under the authority of someone in charge of a commercial aircraft." Leavitt's remarks drew a standing ovation from the packed auditorium, and clips from her speech went viral across conservative platforms. Some even speculated the incident had effectively secured her a future Senate run, with prominent figures in the GOP reportedly encouraging her to consider it. Meanwhile, Democratic lawmakers issued more cautious responses. Most avoided direct commentary on the pilot's actions, instead redirecting focus to the need for civility and mutual respect in public spaces. A joint statement from several House Democrats read, "While freedom of expression is vital, so, too, is the expectation that those in professional roles act with restraint, dignity, and care for the public trust." Behind the scenes, internal documents leaked from the airline suggested growing concern not just about PR fallout, but potential lawsuits and regulatory sanctions. A risk assessment memo indicated that similar politically charged incidents, even without confrontation, could result in perceived threats to passenger safety, potentially violating federal transport statutes. Flight crews across the country were reminded of internal policies prohibiting unsolicited political conversations with passengers while on duty. Though the rules had long existed, the airline began enforcing them more strictly, including mandatory retraining for flight staff. For the passengers who experienced the event firsthand, reactions remained mixed. Some defended the pilot, calling his behavior courageous and conscientious, while others described it as overstepping and inappropriate. One man, seated across the aisle from Leavitt, told a local reporter, "I came to admire how calm she was. It could have turned into a real panic, but she held her ground without raising her voice." Another passenger, a self-identified progressive, admitted, "Even though I agreed with the pilot's sentiment, the timing and place were completely wrong. When you're responsible for hundreds of lives, your personal feelings need to take a back seat, literally and figuratively." Public opinion reflected this divide. National polling showed a nearly even split. 44% believed the pilot acted unprofessionally and should face disciplinary action, while 41% viewed his actions as a legitimate expression of concern. The remaining 15% said they weren't sure or needed more information. The FAA, sensing the political pressure building around the case, pledged transparency and impartiality in its ongoing investigation. "Our responsibility is public safety," an FAA spokesperson said. "Our review will be guided by that principle alone." As for the pilot, his future remained uncertain. With legal counsel advising silence, speculation grew about whether he would return to the skies at all. Reports indicated he had received both threats and support online, further complicating the emotional aftermath of the incident. Some advocacy groups even offered him legal assistance should the investigation lead to termination or licensing consequences. With the nation's attention still fixed on the story, commentators have likened it to past flashpoint moments, those rare, seemingly small events that reveal something larger and more troubling about the national mood. It became a conversation not just about politics or professionalism, but about the growing tension between identity, authority, and belief in America today. Long after the flight was grounded, its impact remains airborne, circling through cable, news segments, social media threads, campaign rallies, and coffee shop arguments. For Leavitt, it's become a powerful rallying cry. For her critics, a cautionary tale about exploiting conflict for political gain. And for the average citizen, it's yet another reminder that even in the most mundane settings, a seat on a plane, a polite conversation, a routine trip, nothing in America is apolitical anymore. As the weeks passed, the story refused to fade. New layers of complexity emerged as additional footage was released, revealing a few seconds of the pilot speaking to flight attendants after the confrontation. In the muffled audio, he could be heard muttering, "I shouldn't have said that, but I've had enough of these people acting like they own the truth." While not a direct threat, the moment fueled further scrutiny and reignited debate over whether emotional exhaustion or political bias had compromised his professional judgment. Leavitt's team responded swiftly. Her communications director released a statement saying, "That clip only reinforces what we've known all along. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern of behavior by someone in a position of power who allowed politics to override professionalism. If this is happening in the cockpit, where else is it happening?" On Capitol Hill, the ripple effects grew. Several Republican lawmakers introduced the Passenger Rights and Political Neutrality Act, aimed at protecting travelers from unsolicited political commentary or intimidation from airline staff. The bill included clauses that would make it easier for passengers to file formal complaints and impose stiffer penalties on airline employees found to have violated neutrality policies while on duty. The bill quickly became a flashpoint, with civil liberties groups accusing lawmakers of trying to suppress free expression. The ACLU issued a warning that while the conduct in question was concerning, any legislation must avoid setting dangerous precedents that chill protected speech. "We must draw a distinction between unprofessional behavior and unconstitutional censorship," they said. Leavitt, however, dismissed the criticism, arguing that common sense boundaries are being mistaken for oppression. "This isn't about silencing people. It's about ensuring that those entrusted with public safety are focused on their duty, not political debate," she said during a nationally televised interview. The cockpit is not a campaign stage. As Leavitt's message gained momentum, Democrats faced growing pressure to respond. While most continued to defend the right to disagree, some quietly acknowledged that the pilot's timing had been deeply unwise. A few centrist voices within the party began to echo concerns about professionalism across institutions being eroded by ideological fervor. Political strategists noted that the incident had done more than spark outrage. It had galvanized a base. In a climate where many voters feel mistrustful of public institutions, Leavitt's story struck a nerve. It became not just an anecdote, but a symbol of a perceived broader fight, one where ordinary Americans feel bullied, dismissed, or undermined by those in authority who see them as political adversaries. At a campaign event in Florida, Leavitt made this the centerpiece of her speech. "They want you to feel small, to stay quiet, to accept that your beliefs don't belong in polite society, or even in seat 3A. But I'm here to tell you, speak up, because if we don't, they'll assume they've won." The crowd erupted, chanting her name. The incident had moved beyond controversy. It had become a rallying cry. Yet amid the frenzy, quieter voices called for reflection. A former flight attendant published an op-ed pleading for a return to civility and restraint in public roles. "The skies used to be neutral ground, a place where politics were checked at the gate. We need to reclaim that space, not for left or right, but for sanity." Aviation associations echoed that sentiment, urging airlines and unions to work together to rebuild trust in professional boundaries. Several carriers began reviewing employee mental health programs, acknowledging that the pressures of post-pandemic travel, political division, and cultural conflict were weighing heavily on frontline workers. Still, for the American public, the flight had become more than an isolated incident. It was a parable of the times, a lesson in how quickly ordinary moments can spiral into ideological battles, and how difficult it has become to separate personal conviction from professional responsibility. For Leavitt, it may have been the defining moment of her political ascent, the day she transformed turbulence into traction. But for the rest of the country, it left a lingering unease, a question of whether we can ever return to a time when a flight was just a flight, and not the front line of America's cold Civil War. Even as the public focus began to shift toward the next political skirmish, the reverberations of the incident continued to echo through multiple layers of American life. Schools of journalism, law, and political science began dissecting the flight as a case study, one that merged media influence, constitutional questions, and the psychology of modern polarization. At Georgetown University, a constitutional law panel debated whether the incident constituted a violation of Leavitt's civil liberties or merely a breach of protocol. Legal scholars were split. It's not illegal to confront someone verbally, one professor argued, but when it's done by someone in a position of power with access to your itinerary and the ability to divert your flight, it's something more than a heated exchange. It's a misuse of authority. The cultural impact deepened when a popular docuseries platform announced it was developing an episode centered on the confrontation. Titled 35,000 Feet and Falling, the documentary aimed to explore the erosion of institutional trust and the growing friction between personal ideology and professional duty. Leavitt was reportedly in talks to participate in an exclusive interview for the episode's final act. In parallel, a broader reckoning was taking place within the aviation industry. The airline involved announced it would be conducting a third-party audit of its internal culture and policies, seeking to understand whether broader patterns of political bias or internal discord were affecting staff performance. Unions issued cautious support, though some members privately expressed worry that a witch hunt might follow. Yet for all the noise, one group remained largely overlooked. The everyday passengers who, like the rest of America, had boarded the plane expecting nothing more than an ordinary flight. In interviews published weeks after the incident, many described the unsettling feeling of being trapped in a metal tube, while a political drama unfolded just a few feet away. It felt like reality TV, and we were the unwilling audience, one passenger said. It wasn't violent, it wasn't chaotic, but it was uncomfortable. You could sense everyone thinking the same thing. Is this really happening here? Some said they'd become more hesitant to fly. Others said they'd started thinking differently about authority, professionalism, and even politics itself. In a curious twist, a small but growing online group emerged, advocating for ideological disarmament zones, voluntary spaces like planes, hospitals, and schools, where political discourse would be socially discouraged, regardless of affiliation. Meanwhile, Leavitt continued to capitalize on the momentum. She released a short video ad using real footage from the incident, spliced with ominous music and images of American flags. The tagline, "If they can target me, they can target you." It was a clear play toward the populist base, tapping into the ever-present anxiety about the reach of elite institutions and the vulnerability of dissenting voices. The pilot's fate was sealed quietly. The airline confirmed that after a thorough investigation, he would not return to active duty. No formal charges were filed, but his license was suspended pending review by the FAA. In a statement, his attorney said, he regrets the confrontation and acknowledges it was inappropriate in the context of his professional role. But he stands by his convictions and hopes the country can one day find a way to speak freely and responsibly. The story eventually slipped from the headlines, but not from the national memory. It became one of those moments, like a viral video or a courtroom outburst, that encapsulated something deeper and more dangerous. The sense that America no longer knows where the line is between personal and professional, between disagreement and disrespect, between freedom and friction. As campaign season heated up, more politicians invoked the incident as a warning or a rallying cry. More airlines revised their policies. More citizens became wary of where they voiced their opinions, or who might be listening. And somewhere, high above the country still bitterly divided, another plane took off into a blue sky. The cabin lights dimmed, the engines hummed, and the passengers settled in, wondering perhaps not just where they were headed, but what kind of country they'd be landing in when they arrived. In the months that followed, the incident faded from the headlines but lingered in the public psyche like turbulence after a smooth descent. Political campaigns referenced it less frequently, but the emotional residue remained. Voters brought it up at town halls, pundits alluded to it in debates, and social media still recycled clips of the confrontation, anytime tensions flared elsewhere in the country. For Leavitt, the flight had become more than a personal ordeal. It was a pivotal chapter in her political narrative. She had gone from rising GOP figure to symbol of ideological resilience. Her campaign coffers swelled, her poll numbers rose, and eventually she announced a Senate bid. In her launch video, she stood on an airport tarmac, the distant hum of jets behind her saying, "They tried to ground me, but I'm still flying." The message was clear. She wasn't just running for office. She was running on the memory of that flight, the confrontation and everything it came to represent. Her supporters embraced it. To them, she was proof that speaking your mind, even when unpopular, could become a force of momentum. Critics, however, accused her of manufacturing outrage into political capital. A few even claimed the pilot incident had been opportunistically inflated, though investigations confirmed that the confrontation had been organic, not staged. As for the pilot, he disappeared from public view entirely. He retired quietly, accepting a severance package and declining all future media inquiries. Those close to him described a man deeply changed, not regretful for what he said, but overwhelmed by what followed. He never imagined it would explode like that, one friend said. He thought he was just speaking up. Now he sees how quickly things spiral. The airline quietly overhauled its training programs and instituted stricter social media monitoring for staff, reinforcing a corporate culture of focus-first professionalism. Other airlines followed suit. Passengers began noticing the change. Fewer casual chats between crew and flyers, more scripted interactions, an invisible wall of caution built between service and opinion. The FAA, in its final report, stopped, short of punitive action, but issued a rare public statement warning aviation professionals to exercise judgment and neutrality in all passenger interactions, especially in politically sensitive times. It was a bureaucratic note, but one that signaled how seriously the government had taken the affair. Culturally, the incident left its mark. Late-night comedians joked that the new pre-flight announcements might include, "Please fasten your seatbelt, secure your tray table, and keep your political views in the upright and locked position." But under the humor was a serious truth, that American polarization had reached 35,000 feet and wasn't coming down anytime soon. Months later, a journalist wrote a long-form retrospective titled, "The Flight That Divided America." It explored the timeline of the event, the players involved, and the national aftershocks. The piece ended not with analysis or blame, but with a quote from a flight attendant who had served on that very flight. "We used to say the sky was the last neutral place. No borders, no politics, just clouds and time. But now it feels like there's nowhere left to escape it, not even up there." And so, the story ended as it began, not with a scream or a scandal, but with a simple exchange in a place meant for silence. One voice, one response, and a country still learning how to navigate its own airspace, where every altitude brings a new kind of pressure, and the dividing lines aren't just on the ground anymore.